Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 21 of the Hideout. Today, we're going to be talking about Web3 player economies. So awesome to have everybody here. Just want to let you all know that we are waiting on one more speaker, and then we will get started. So just give us a few more minutes, and then we'll get cranking. We have an awesome panel today with members from Splinterlands and from Illuvium, two really pioneers of the Web3 gaming space, especially when it comes to player economy. So really excited for this one. And we'll get started in a couple minutes once we have everybody up. All right, looks like we got the whole gang here. So again, welcome everybody. This is going to be our 21st episode. Really excited to have such a great panel on. We'll start with some introductions. So why don't we start with 16-bit from the Splinterlands team? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Splinterlands, and then a quick introduction of the project for those of us who may not know.
Yeah, this is 16-bit, otherwise known as John. I'm the VP of Sales at Splinterlands. I've been here for about a year and a month now, and it was my first entry or first foray into Web3. I was already a bit of a crypto enthusiast, enough to know that I didn't know enough. And so I had an opportunity to learn the new language, and the best way to do that is to go live in the country that speaks it. So very happy to join here. Previous to this, I had a fairly long career basically helping to build education technology startup companies and sell them off to textbook publishers. So I had, there's some interesting overlaps in the two spaces, but that kind of led me into this space and enjoying the hell out of myself, honestly. So very nice to meet you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. And I'm excited to hear more about all of what you guys are doing at Splinterlands and your perspective on this issue, because you guys were one of the earliest Web3 games and player economies I've been a part of. So just really excited to have you here. Another incredible project within the space that we're big fans of here at the Satoshiverse is Illuvium. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Illuvium and what you guys are building?
Awesome. Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank God. All right, my internet got knocked out by a storm. Thank you for being patient. So I'm the host and executive producer at Illuvium. That basically means I produce all of our official videos, podcasts, live streams, and sort of audio-visual promotional materials for Illuvium, and I'm a spokesperson for the project. Prior to Illuvium, for the last 15 years, I've been producing gaming videos, live streams, and creating media startups in the gaming space. I've produced over 10,000 videos that have gotten a couple billion views, and I was one of the early Twitch live streamers, and one of the companies I built, TGN, got acquired and then went public on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And I've just been kind of living, breathing, eating gaming and video game media for the last 15 years, since YouTube was a joke to today, where it's the dominant platform. So that's my background, and I really appreciate you having me here on the Twitter space.
Amazing. I'm really happy to have you here, and I think it's always an interesting perspective when you get people who are creating content in the space, because ultimately that's going to be what allows us to reach the Web2 with the kind of traditional gaming community with what we're doing. So, really happy to have that perspective. Spencer, our co-host, why don't you give a quick introduction of yourself, and then we'll jump in to the questions. I guess I can, after you go, I'll introduce myself for those of you who don't know me, and then we can talk a little bit about the Satoshiverse and everything we're doing. But Spencer, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Spencer Vogel. I've been involved with crypto and Web3, specifically NFTs, since 2018, and crypto since 2017. Mostly as an enthusiast at first. My career started out mostly in management consulting, but started working with Nick and working in Web3 full time a couple years ago. Working with the Satoshiverse and the Apollo Entertainment team, working on the business development and really strategy side of things, helping with token launches and NFT projects and everything that we've been doing over the last couple of years. So yeah, and why don't you go, Nick?
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Spencer. I guess one small thing just for housekeeping for the other speakers on here, feel free to post any kind of announcements or anything you've got going on to the spaces, links or whatever. I think that everyone would love to see more on the projects. I'll post something because we just had our alpha phase 2 of our launch, which we'll talk a little bit about, but my name is Nick Frontera. I am the CEO and co-founder of Apollo Entertainment, which is the company behind the Satoshiverse, where I'm the project lead. For those of you who don't know, who might be joining us from other communities, the Satoshiverse is a blockchain-themed superhero universe that we've been building for the last 2.5 years. It originally began as a collaboration with DC and Marvel comic artist Jose Delbo, and has expanded into an entire world that we're building. We've been developing our play and earn game, I guess if you even call it that anymore, are really a blockchain enabled game, Satoshi's Legions, the Battle for the Outskirts, for the last 1.5 years. And we just released our alpha phase 2, which is open to our Legionnaire and 8mo Army avatar holders before we expand to the rest of our holders in the next several months. So we're really excited about that. We'll get into it a little bit more as we go through. But again, really excited to have everybody here. And yeah, Spencer, if you want to take it away, we can get into the questions.
Sure thing. So we'll start off with a couple questions for everyone before moving into some individual questions. And I'll call into someone to start, and then you guys can feel free to just jump into the discussion. And I'll call on you if there's a lull. But so the first question is, what are the key benefits of integrating Web3 technology into gaming economies? Andrew, why don't you start us off with this one?
Sure. So it has everything to do with giving players more control and ultimately giving them more interesting experiences in the future. So the pitch everybody's been giving right now in this space is, don't you want to own your video game assets, guys? Guys? Anybody? Crickets. Nobody really cares. So I don't think that that's actually the curb appeal for this space, though the functionality of owning your assets in video games is cool. I don't think that's really a hook that's going to bring gamers in to metaverses or Web3 gaming experiences. I think what's going to bring them in is more interesting games and more interesting mechanics in games because it's on the blockchain and because you have Web3 technology. So for example, at Illuvium, our focus is building all of our games, our Illuvium Zero, our city builder game, Illuvium Arena, our auto battler game, and Illuvium Overworld, our open world collection game, to be interoperable with each other so that the actions you take in one of our games directly impacts the things you can do and the actions you can take in the next game. Adding another layer of gameplay, another layer of strategy, and another layer of interest to the actual game on a game design level. Ultimately when people start owning their assets in video games, they realize, oh, okay, I never want to go back. But that's not what's going to bring people in here. What's going to bring people in are interesting sort of meta game sort of experiences, maybe the meta game economy, or maybe thinking about how I'm going to shift resources from your city builder game Illuvium Zero into Arena. Do I want to use my fuel for that, or do I want to use it for something else? Okay, this alluvial I have in the overworld, do I want to fuse them here, or do I want to bring an alluvial into Arena as a part of my deck? And those sort of cross-game design elements take especially strategy games in particular to a whole nother level. Like in Web 2 or before Web 3, strategy games, you were just stuck inside of one game. And you could just do the strategies inside that game, and that's the limit of your possible experiences. Now strategies can cross multiple games, multiple experiences, multiple gameplay genres. I think that's actually the curb appeal. I think that's actually the interesting thing that Web3 can offer metaverses and video game industry moving forward. Ownership is a side dish. So anybody out there leading with ownership as a part of your pitch for your game, I would ask you to reconsider and to focus on what new gameplay experiences are gamers going to have because of this technology. That's going to get them excited to try.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting, right? Because I think I agree with some aspects of that perspective. I actually, I'm a believer in ownership being the main dish, the side dish, and the dessert. But I think it's how you pitch it, right? Because I do think it is a very abstract concept, right? To see why ownership is appealing, right? Because no one's really getting deep into the terms of service and understanding that all they're getting is a license, and it's kind of too in the weeds, I think, for your casual gamer. So I definitely agree that the pitch needs to be more comprehensive as to what we're bringing to the space, right? And I think, kind of building off of your point, um, I think it's great to have interoperability within a closed ecosystem. I think that is step one, right? Like, you have the same publisher producing multiple games and you have some interoperability between them. And I definitely think that blockchain makes that easier because you're, essentially storing all that data and metadata on a separate level, right? That can be referenced by those different games. But I mean, I'm really excited to see cross game, cross developer interoperability. I think that's going to be coming a little bit down the line, but I think that's where the real curb appeal starts, right? If you're using your assets, your game assets from a project you love in a game like Fortnite, if they were to allow, NFTs or, something like that, where you can take an avatar into a shooter, but then also have it in some kind of turn-based strategy game, and then also have it in some sort of, other experience that may not be the same developer building out these kind of mini games, right? But could be, a feature title that a developer spent, millions and millions of dollars building in 2 or 3 years, and then use it in another feature title. I think ultimately that's what's going to really get people excited. I think there's also a little bit of a disconnect, and it's interesting, I think, because gamers, haven't really gravitated towards the idea of ownership. And like you said, I think once they do, it'll be one of those things where you just never go back, especially for, more RPG style games and progression based games. But I think that, ownership is a difficult pitch to a game developer, right? So if you're telling game developers that there's going to be these downstream sales, and they're not going to be able to be the ultimate, pipeline for people making purchases, and now all of a sudden they have to think about these different business models and move away from, the things that have worked for them for the last 10 years. I think that's actually probably the harder pitch in ownership. I think that, unfortunately, there's just been so much negative, media and whatnot around NFTs generally, that the gaming crowd has not really embraced the ideas of NFTs more than owning their items. So I think owning your items is kind of one of those no-brainer, if it's pitched the right way. Yes, we would love to own our items. No, we don't want to go to a black market, to sell our Diablo items or our RuneScape items. We'd love it if there was some, easy way to do that. And so I think, what more than pitching the abstract concept of ownership, we have to build UI and a better UX for what ownership actually does, the free transfer of assets, the player progression being stored in blockchain metadata. A lot of the things we're working on is exactly that. It's ownership driven, but it's focused on building the rails so that the casual gamer really sees, oh wow, this is fluid. This isn't some clunky thing that's got to be added on top of a game. And then I think what you said in the beginning, it starts with building a great game. And we just haven't seen very many great games in the blockchain space. And I think that's in part because it takes several years to build a great game, and we haven't had several years of, even just NFTs on Ethereum in a viable structure. So, that's going to take some time, and I think we're going to start to see a lot of great games in the next year or so.
Really quick, I just want to quickly respond, and I'd love our friend from Splinterlands to jump in on this. With the you stated the having your own games be interoperable with each other as like step one here. I feel like almost everybody's skipping step one though. So I know step two is very exciting, having games be interoperable with each other. But if you haven't fundamentally designed your game or games to be interoperable with each other, are you going to go back and fundamentally redesign your entire games to be interoperable with other games? Like, you've got to have those ins and outs of your
Absolutely.
game with certain tokens or fuel, not or probably NFTs, but certain game mechanics need to be built, tested, ready for interoperability to happen. And so if you're not making your own games interoperable with each other, then how are you going to even know if those systems even work from a game design standpoint? And so I think a lot of people talk about shallow interoperability between games. Imagine if you could bring a skin over from this to that. I don't think gamers care that much about that. I don't think that's going to be that exciting to them. I think what's going to be more exciting is if you can actually do something meaningful from game one to game two. And if you can do something, the only way you'll be able to do something meaningful from game one to game two is if game one designs their game with proper ins and outs in their game economy and their gameplay that can be plugged in to other games. And so I would I would caution people to get too excited about step two when almost no studios right now are even taking step one.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think we're kind of far away from all of it, right? I guess my thing there is that you could probably do most of the intra-system interoperability, right? Keeping it within your own system without NFTs. I guess that's feasible. It's definitely true that most projects aren't doing it and most studios aren't doing it. So I guess sometimes, I wonder why NFTs, and I think we have to be ready as a as a group and as a community to answer that question. But I completely agree. Like, that has to be something that's front of mind from day one if you want to meaningfully accomplish it, and it's not easy. And so I definitely think what you guys are doing is significant, and I think it's a really important step that we start to see different models and different approaches. I think it's so important that people are taking different approaches to Web3 infrastructure. I guess I just wouldn't want to discount ownership, because I really do think that's the meat and potatoes. But I think that I'm excited. I'm excited to see where these extended use cases of NFTs and using the technology in ways that other studios aren't and projects aren't take us, because I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So, just jumping in with a thought on that, and then I'll get some primary thoughts here. But I couldn't agree more. I think that that's one of the more interesting enabling things about Web3 games is this promise, this opportunity that you can have some level of interoperability. And I do feel like interoperability is a buzzword. I'm not sure that everybody that says it really knows what it means or what's possible and what's not. For example, having some NFT that's completely outside of this game ecosystem or this studio's ecosystem and having that float around on the blockchain and then drop in and use in some other random game doesn't feel like the way to go. But I completely agree with Andrew's thoughts that having items that you own and functionality and part of the game mechanics in one of your games benefit your ability to play in another one of your games. I think suddenly that gets really interesting for gamers. And this idea that curb appeal and why does somebody come into Web3 gaming in the first place is very different from why they stay. So why you come and why you stay is really kind of a sales and marketing problem to solve. But we do have to figure out what are those triggers to bring people over, and also completely agree. The Rails do need to be better. This onboarding experience needs to be smoother, cleaner, easier. Less buzzwords. The average person that's out there gaming, and there's over 3 billion of them. If it's just as easy to come into a Web3 game and get started up and discover all of these benefits of Web3 games that would cause you to stay around, if we can, as an industry, really solve that better and better over time, we're going to see that mass adoption. I'm convinced of it. But the why you stay piece, so in our case for Splinterlands, we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary of launching here in May. And it's been on chain since the very beginning. Very heavy strategy oriented game. The resulting gameplay at the base level is an auto battler. We are building and releasing additional games now as well. And I'll get into this concept of a gaming, really expanding our gaming ecosystem exponentially. I'll get into that here in a minute. But we're doing millions of transactions per day on chain, and without gas fees and with a lot of speed. And we do have, via the Hive blockchain, a lot of really interesting benefits that a lot of other people in Web3 don't even really know all that much about. For example, your wallet address is your in-game name. It's not a long string of random numbers and characters. Yes, you still have a browser extension like you would with MetaMask to sign transactions, but you can have the low-level transactions being signed basically automatically that you can opt into if you want. And there's different levels of keys that have different levels of security measures with them, so you're not really risking assets when you're just playing the game. But the why you stay really involves that idea of ownership. I think once the average gamer discovers that, hey, this money that I'm already dumping into a game, when I dump it into a game over here, that's money I can get back out of the game. I think that becomes really interesting. And I agree there's probably going to be a lot of skepticism from a lot of people about this idea of ownership if they don't really fully understand it. But once they get in and they do understand it, that becomes a reason to stay. And we've been very successful with this in our own ecosystem. We have a very low churn rate. We've got a couple 100,000 daily active users. And the community themselves, they're really enthusiastic and really want to help in growing the ecosystem as well, of course, because it benefits them and it benefits everybody else in it. But there's a couple other elements to Web3 gaming that I think are sort of overlooked in a way. One of them is the education aspect. So I mentioned earlier in my intro, I had a whole career in education technology. And during that part of my career, certainly exposed a lot to learning science. And learning science, there's a lot of learning science studies out there that, kind of examine what are the best ways that people learn. One of the universally accepted best ways that people learn is through the gamification of any process or information. Naturally, games themselves in the Web3 space are going to become a really nice conduit to understanding Web3 and learning about finance side of it and learning about the tokens and economies. And I can speak to that with experience too. I mean, when I started playing Splinterlands myself a little over a year ago, there's so much meta. There's such a game behind the game in the app that, I got hooked on playing the core game itself initially. But that created much easier bridges over to these other aspects of GameFi, playing with liquidity pools, learning how to use a decentralized exchange, marketplaces, rentals for cards, staking mechanisms, different types of tokens, voting systems, all of these things that the Splinterlands ecosystem has baked right into it. I think Web3 gaming has a real opportunity once we get the gamers in, which is a different problem to solve. How do we make them stay? Well, when they start learning about these things, which gaming is a great way to do that, then they sort of discover for themselves the real value and the benefits. And all of a sudden, instead of just getting that entertainment dollar from the gamer, I think we're going to start attracting a lot more of their investment dollars as well, as they participate in some of the better gaming ecosystems. So that's one of the big points. Another big point in Web3 gaming that I think is going to be really attractive, and again, I think this is going to be more in the why you stay category, but it's this promise of decentralization, or the ability to decentralize an ecosystem. Now, that's not going to be universally executed by all games and game studios, right? Especially if we have Web2 studios trying to come in. They still very much want to protect business models that they already have in place. They still very much want to be profitable as a company, and I think that's going to lead to a lot of skepticism on truly decentralizing the game. We happen to sit at the opposite end of the spectrum. We want to get to a place where even if the company Splinterlands or Steam Monsters Corp were to be shut down, the game would just continue to run. And we're getting really close to that point. We still have some steps to go, but what we think can be possible, because we're already doing it, is if you have a governance token that really provides governance functionality, and you have a whole system of validator nodes, all of a sudden you can put a lot of power into the hands of the community in terms of voting power. And so, with our governance token, which is SPS, holders of SPS can choose to stake their SPS. If they stake their SPS, the quantity of SPS they have staked dictates their voting power. And we started off with a proposal system last August that, basically was just us issuing proposals when we had some sort of seminal decision to make about game design or improvements. We would just release that to the community and the ecosystem, and they would vote yay or nay. And if they voted nay, we didn't do it. If they voted yes, we did. That progressed really near the end of 2022 to where we now have a mechanism where community members can issue proposals. And there's a cost for them to do that. And there's a screening process to keep it from becoming, thousands of just, horseshit proposals kind of coming through. But we've had a number of different community sourced proposals come through, and we've executed those. And as far as the validator node software goes, we already started the validator node license sale last May, but the validator node software itself is going to go live here sometime in the next couple months. It's in testnet right now, so it's just going to hit mainnet here pretty soon. So those are my two big additions, on top of a lot of agreement with what you guys are already talking about, is, this idea that games are going to be a wonderful educational tool for those that actually do make the jump into the space to learn a lot about not just gaming in Web3, but about Web3 in general. And number two, the opportunity to decentralize, and that'll be a choice by the game studio on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, I think I think those are just the tip of the iceberg on the possibilities with Web3 gaming. I think those that come into the space and focus on producing entertainment value and just make a fun game. People want to play fun games. That drives over a third of the world's population to play video games already. So I think that curb appeal piece is really, really important. But man, once we get them over here, there's a lot more diversity in the opportunities to get them to stick. So yeah, great question though, by the way.
Beautiful. Thank you, gentlemen. So just in the interest of time, I think we're going to move on to some individual questions, and then we'll come back to another everyone question a little bit later if we have time. So why don't we go to Andrew? Why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of what the Illuvium player economy looks like?
Sure. So basically, I outlined earlier the multiple games that we have, and each one can be played free to play by anyone. But of course, if you want to get significant value, let's say, out of any of these games, then you'll need to put some value in. So just here's the TLDR layman's version of how the economy works. So Illuvium Zero is our mobile town builder game. Last year, we did a land sale and sold 20,000 plots of land. You've heard a lot of Metaverse and Web3 gaming projects selling land, and then the land maybe doesn't do anything or is, I don't know, in some crappy looking 3D world. Our land NFTs are plugged directly into Illuvium Zero, this video game. You're going to build a virtual industrial complex where you have element sites and fuel sites. And ultimately, just to simplify it, the main thing you're going to want to get out of Illuvium Zero is fuel. Why? Well, you can either take that fuel and sell it on the Illuvidex, our marketplace, or you can use that fuel to enable more gameplay fun in another one of our games, Illuvium Overworld. So Illuvium Overworld is a AAA Avatar-like fantastical sci-fi universe where you're exploring this open world and you're collecting illuvials, which are basically like, Pokemon for adults, but crazier and more unexpected. You need to use that fuel that you could have earned from Illuvium Zero, from your land and playing that industrial builder game, to go out and to go collect illuvials in the open world. And it unlocks higher tier instances, think of it as that, for you to be able to go collect illuvials and go collect resources in the overworld. If you are lucky enough to capture one of these illuvials in the overworld game, these are all NFTs. And you asked earlier, what's the point of an NFT? Why even have them if you can have it all on a centralized server? It's the decision I just highlighted a moment ago. If you're playing Illuvium Zero, you can either A, go sell it on the marketplace to get value for it, or B, go use it in another video game to go collect more things. If it weren't an NFT, you wouldn't necessarily be able to get the value out of option A in that decision tree. So in the Illuvium overworld, let's say you were lucky enough to catch an alluvial and you meant that as an NFT. You can either A, sell that on the Illuvidex if you'd like, or B, take that alluvial into our auto battler game, Illuvium Arena. Okay, so let's go over to Illuvium Arena. You play Illuvium Arena, you battle your alluvials, and then you can move up the leaderboards, you can beat other people in PvP, and you can et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can go into further detail if we'd like. But the point of sharing those examples is to say that each of our games has NFTs that you can earn by playing the game. And you can decide whether you want to trade or whether you want to sell those or buy those on the Illuvidex, or whether you'd like to use those NFTs in the next game. And so that creates this interesting game in each one individually. But then it also creates this sort of meta game of how you're moving your resources and your NFTs across each of these titles in order to, let's say, best optimize your strategy. And so a lot of people ask, well, how do you make sure that these NFTs or the value of them or the economy doesn't break? You need to have sinks or, burning NFTs. So we have that for each of our different types of NFTs. The fuel, for example, from Illuvium Zero, you have to basically burn it to be able to go out in the overworld in these instances I was talking about. The alluvials I was mentioning a moment ago, if you want to fuse multiple alluvials together, you can essentially get a more powerful alluvial in the process, thus burning alluvial NFTs, etc. So we've designed all of our NFTs and all these experiences to basically connect to our other games in interesting ways. And we've got sort of burn mechanics or sinks for each of these NFT types to ensure that they don't get inflated and out of control. And one thing that's really important to note, there's no token earning. There's no showering, insert the name of your token on people for XYZ. There's not the quote unquote earning really in Illuvium games. You're going to play and acquire NFTs, and then you can make decisions on what you want to do with those NFTs. But there certainly isn't you're going to play and earn some sort of salary, let's say, of getting tokens and people doing spreadsheets on X tokens per hour for this type of grind type of scenario in our economies. That's not an option. And so we're hoping that this is the right model and that this is the best model to use, moving entirely away from play to earn. I mean, you could call it, I guess, play and own. I don't even like that. It's it's something more specific than that. It's earning NFTs in these games and then having more interesting decisions to make with them. That's what's happening here in the way that our games are designed. And that makes the games more interesting on a strategic level if you want to get really deep. One of the biggest issues with strategy games in Web 2 is people get tired of them. And in order to prevent players from getting tired of playing strategy games, you have to make your systems more and more deep and more complex. You have to make bosses have infinity HP, etc. But people drop off of strategy games. Go look at the top 10 most streamed games on Twitch right now, guys. Are they strategy games? Sometimes one or two gets on the list, but for the most part, strategy games have kind of fallen out of popularity in mainstream gaming. And the issue is that people are bored with the level of depth in these strategy games, and they run out of things to do. And so I think that this NFT of functionality and Illuvium's economy gives new, multiple layers of depth to strategy. And that, I think, is going to suck a lot of those people in that want to have a deeper, more interesting experience. And Illuvium's economy is designed from the ground up to facilitate that. Hopefully it works out, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, I love that model. I mean, I think it's really, especially when you mention things like having different touch points, whether it's, a mobile game allowing you to earn resources for more of like a Unreal-based client game or Unity-based client game. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff that projects can do there. We've certainly been designing around that kind of concept of having a gaming ecosystem with multiple games within it, with interoperable assets, which I think is so important to what we're doing. So I think that's awesome. I remember early days of gaming. My early days were on RuneScape, the classic version, and it had a similar experience where you had one completely different gaming experience, and in those days it was terrible, but you had one gaming experience to gather the ores, which would eventually be either something you would sell to people who were going to forge them, or it was something you were going to train up your forging level and forge yourself. And then once you forged them, they became weapons, and you could decide if you're going to sell those weapons or if you're going to focus on forging and go and fight the quests or PvP or whatever it might be. So there was that. One of the things I thought was so interesting even about early RuneScape, and I think to your point, why players were willing to spend hours and hours and hours clicking a rock over and over again was because there were these choices and things that you could do that really made all these different experiences come together. And even a rudimentary game that had all these different components, I think that's what made RuneScape, which is I think one of the longest lasting games of all time in terms of multiplayer and player economies. I think it's so cool to see how that then extends to Web3, which comes to that idea of decentralization, right? Because in RuneScape, sure, you can go into the market and sell it to other people for gold, or you can sell it to whoever for you could go on a black market, right, and a forum and sell it for real money. But those rails have always been restricted. So I think what's great about Web3 is you can really expand upon those concepts of having an ecosystem rather than just a single gaming experience, and have the technology, the NFTs, like you were mentioning, because they are NFTs, you have an already established methods of selling those all around the world without those barriers to exit. So I think that's really cool. I love that model, and we're doing a lot of that as well. So it's very, very cool to see what you guys have been doing with Illuvium.
Nick, while I got you up here, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of an overview of what Toshi versus player economy looks like?
Sure. So we kind of started from the perspective of an RPG, and then we thought, how does Web3 enable an extension of what RPGs have done successfully for the last 20 years, right? So you look at games like RuneScape, like World of Warcraft, like Diablo, they've all proven that, you can have very well developed player economies in a Web2 game. And so what we were really looking at was a couple of things. One, how do you make kind of your holder community who, invested in your game very early, is part of the reason why, you've gotten here and been able to develop. How do you make them a key component to the gameplay? And so that's kind of, recognizing as well that not all people who buy NFTs to support a project are necessarily the type of players who are going to have time to go into the game and play the game for hours and hours and hours. A lot of these, people may not be gamers, right? So we wanted to make sure that everyone was kind of included in our system. So what we did was, like Illuvium, we don't have currently, at least, an ERC20 token, but instead we have lots of NFT resources, so which are all going to be ERC 1155s, which at the end of the day is very similar to an ERC20, except you can attach media, and there's not really these liquidity vehicles, although more and more third parties are making that stuff happen. So ERC 1155s are becoming more like ERC 20s, I think, every day. But at the end of the day, the idea is to have a resource-based system. So the key resource within our economy is going to be called Satoshi's crystals. So when you think about the resources needed to get that elite weapon or elite armor or components for your avatar to really scale up, you're going to need these crystals in order to do it, as well as other things. And so the way we're doing it is 50% of the, let's say, drop rate of crystals will be in game, and then 50% will be claimable by our avatar holders through an allocation. So essentially, staking was very popular for the last couple of years. I think projects are going to start to move away from staking and rather just reward their holders, without all the restrictions, I think, that come with staking. At least that's the direction we're moving, because we think, just as a matter of legal principles, I think there's going to be some issues with staking, traditional staking, in the future. But we kind of redesigned that system to make it all about, rewarding the holders and making them part of the game economy. So you will be able to earn certain resources in games, but you'll also be able to earn those resources passively as a holder. Beyond that, I think you circle back to a lot of what makes RPGs interesting, right? You have a really good game with a really good story, with a really good gameplay mechanics that incentivize character progression, incentivize item, that grind that people have done in RPGs to get these really cool items and to min-max and to, optimize your character. And then you take all that and you make it NFTs, right? So that it's all freely transferable on the blockchain. Players can interact with each other. Players can exchange value, whether that's items for items in some sort of trading mechanic, or whether that's, items for tokens like Ethereum or, other ERC20 tokens. But at the end of the day, it's taking a lot of the, kind of proven components of traditional RPGs and applying Web3 to them from an ownership and decentralization standpoint, and then creating these holder incentives for those who have, really been in the project since the beginning and put a lot into supporting the project. I guess the other really big thing that we think is significant is progression. So all of the progression within the game. So for example, if you go in, in a traditional game in RuneScape and you get your character level 99 of some, skill set, you're not going to be able to monetize that in any way without selling, the character itself or the account, right? Which you can't do, without getting banned or blacklisted or whatever. So what we're actually doing is we're tying experience to the avatar token metadata, so that when you are playing the game and you get your, avatar to level 20, that avatar is going to say level 20 in the metadata. And therefore, if you want to sell it, people are going to see, oh, this is a level 20 avatar. I can buy that, while of course managing kind of some of those pay to play concerns that is kind of, at least at a surface level, why a lot of RPGs don't like to open up the rails. But I think those are probably the key components.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. So before we move on to the next question, every week we do a giveaway for one of our 8Mo Army avatars. And the winner for this week is going to be at L4L4L4SPS. So congratulations, send us a DM and we'll make sure to get you your prize. So next question is to John. So can you tell us a bit about the Splinterlands multi-token model, which you got into a little bit, but get into a little more detail what kind of each of your tokens do, and how that relates to your greater player economy, and really just any other updates that you have about the things you got going on right now.
Yeah, no doubt. So there's a variety of tokens in the Splinterlands ecosystem. The most important core pieces, of course, are the non-fungible tokens, the cards themselves, as well as the series, or the way we use blockchain to or the way we use NFTs to do other things. Like, for example, our primary revenue generating product is selling card packs, and the card pack itself is an NFT. And when you buy one and open it, it actually burns that one off and creates 5 cards, which are each NFTs. So we use these different mechanics around the non-fungible tokens. But I think the meat of your question is really targeting the fungible tokens that are in our ecosystem, of which there are 3. So we have a governance token, which is SPS. And the governance token it serves a variety of functions in the ecosystem. Of course, it has a cap supply. It has a distribution schema. It has its own white paper that describes all of the use cases and that distribution and everything else. But the purpose of SPS is to create true governance and put the power in the hands of the ecosystem members with voting power that they have because of their quantity of SPS that they have in their wallet. So that's kind of the main force in terms of fungible token within our ecosystem. But then we have a really interesting setup with 2 additional fungibles. So the second one is dark energy crystals, or DEC. DEC is meant to be, and we think it is, the first product-backed stablecoin. And what we mean by that is the value of DEC is pegged to the price of card packs. So roughly speaking, 1,000 dark energy crystals is meant to be pegged to $1. And the way that we do that is when we charge $4 for a pack of cards, you can pay $4 of fiat currency through PayPal or Venmo, or you can use other crypto, $4 worth, or you can spend 4,000 DEC. And so, that keeps sort of the downward price pressure on DEC to remain at peg. And then in the other direction, we have to have a whole series of sources and sinks, or a whole series of sinks, I should say, that makes DEC more scarce. And we also have another mechanism by which if DEC gets about 2.5% above its peg value, we have a way that you can burn SPS, the governance token, in exchange for DEC. And if it gets above about 2.5% of peg, it becomes profitable to do so. So that's another mechanism that helps to keep that price stable. Now, of course, market conditions and previous inflation that we fixed, mid-year last year, that has caused DEC to be below peg. So it's about 4/5 of peg right now. But what that does is it effectively gives you a discount on packs, right? So you can still spend $4 or 4,000 DEC on a pack of cards, but with DEC below peg, you effectively, as of right now, you would get a 20% discount on card packs. So that becomes sort of a nice model, and we are doing a massive land expansion right now. So this actually ties in with a lot of the points that have been made throughout this call. or throughout the spaces. But basically, land expansion is meant to create a whole new set of strategies to play the game, and it's effectively a giant economic simulator. But you're going to use your Splinterlands cards that you're not using for the core gameplay. Are you going to use those as workers on your land? You're going to produce resources. You're going to refine those resources. You're going to have all these different land types, terrain types, different rarities that sort of dictate the different types of resources and quantities of resources and rate of mining resources and all of those things. And you're going to be able to participate in that economy as well as minting different types of cards that you're going to be able to play in other games, including Splinterlands. So, that becomes a significant burn mechanism for DEC, because a variety of the things that you're going to need to do to participate in that are going to require you to burn DEC to do so. And so we have a whole system of sinks in addition to the ones that we already have coming out over the course of this year. So that gets really interesting. The third type of token that we have that's fungible is just a voucher token. And it's basically a discount token. So we award vouchers for two specific fundamental things that help with the health of the ecosystem. One is staking SPS. So staking the governance token will give you a consistent flow of voucher tokens throughout the day, every day. And it's based on how many vouchers you get is based on, how much SPS you have staked. And then the other way is by owning SPS validator node licenses. So those are the only two ways you can get them from us, these voucher tokens, but you can also go and acquire them on a variety of decentralized exchanges as well. But vouchers, when you buy card packs at different threshold levels in terms of quantity of card packs, if you burn vouchers with that purchase, it gives you bonus card packs. So it effectively gives you a discount on those. And then we also use it to sort of create gates around some of our special sales that are meant for our existing community, where you have to have vouchers to be able to participate. Some of our card sets, you have to have a voucher per card pack in order to even purchase that card pack. So this system of three different fungible tokens creates, a system of currency within the ecosystem that really benefits the players and benefits the ecosystem itself and supports all of the utility for the NFTs in the ecosystem as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're coming up right at the end here. So I got one last question for Andrew, and then we can wrap up. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges with building a balanced player economy?
That's a good question. So the most honest answer is that no one yet in this space, and I think Splinterlands is the closest to have accomplished at scale, but I still wouldn't consider what they have to be at the scale we know is possible, right? With games, is to know which economic model is the right one. Like literally no one has millions, like 5-10 million plus monthly active users engaging in an economy and know that that model is a solid model that can work. No one has done it yet. And so that's the number one challenge, is that we can take a look at, let's say, ideas that didn't work from Gen 1 games like, let's say, Axie, or Gen 2 games like Axie Infinity, and avoid those. We can do a good job of, let's say, avoiding mistakes that folks have made in the industry prior, but there's not that many best practices to follow, really. Everybody's kind of shooting in the dark here, figuring this out, innovating, and hoping that what's logical and what maybe follows solid, normal economic principles will work here in these games, but we don't know for sure. And that's part of the biggest challenge of developing games in this space and rolling and launching titles is, in the normal gaming space, it's hard enough to make a video game and to have an economy that you completely control as the studio, essentially, and all the values you can change at a whim on the fly yourself, it's hard enough to balance those and to make those work. And for the most part, gamers hate every one of them, even the best ones. Now layer on top of that your player base has marketplaces they can go buy and sell. And so that adds another aspect to the complexity of these systems. Your player base, if you have a governance token, they can make decisions on what is wrong or right or what's going to work in your economy, which adds another layer of complexity. The point of sharing all of this is to say this is far more complicated, it's far more deep, and there's no roadmap to making a great scalable 5-10 million monthly active users game economy yet. Nobody's even come close. That's the number one challenge, is all of those unknowns. And so we have to do a great experiment over and over again. And we're going to see 90% of games and economies and models implode until we see that one big winner. And once there is that one big winner, you better believe everybody's going to be smashing the hell out of the Control-C and Control-V button for their game economy, and they're just going to do that. That's the way mobile games were when mobile games first started. Nobody quite knew how to make a mobile game as profitable as possible. They would sell it to you when they first came out for upfront money on pay gates. They'd sell you in-game items for a couple bucks here and there. There was no best practices until eventually games like Clash of Clans or Candy Crush or various giants within their mobile gaming genres figured out these are the systems that work for these types of games. This is how you most effectively monetize and create an economy. And then everyone else just copied the leader. That's the challenge. So the biggest challenge for Illuvium is we hope that our model will be the first big winner, and we hope that we'll be the leader. And if we are, everyone's going to copy us. And if we're not, then our economic model is going to probably have to change, because we're going to see some other leader pop up that has maybe a better model, and maybe we'll have to adjust. So it's the complexity, it's the unknowns, and it's the fact that no one has done this before in this way. That's the greatest challenge.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I agree too. I think we can learn a lot from past, right? But there's no roadmap for any of this stuff. I think some of the Web 1, Web 2 games provide at least an idea of how to scale a centralized player economy. But like you said, as soon as you open up those outside payment ramps, it gets far more complex, right? So there's only so much we can draw from even the scalability of those systems that have worked, and I think that it's also a resourcing thing. I think some of these companies, you look at Blizzard, and they have a team of game economists constantly rebalancing their player economy, and frankly, a lot of Web3 production studios just don't have those resources. And so, in reality, it may not be a Web3 company that figures out the model that works long term. It could be one of these, legacy giants, these AAA gaming studios that have 200-300, employees working for them, and have millions of dollars to spend on development of a major title that crack the code. But it's going to be like Andrew was saying, based on watching, right, implementing the things that work. And I think we're fortunate as not Blizzard studios, being able to experiment within this space and to try new things and to find that model that works. But even I think if we find a model that works, that model is going to be built upon and expanded upon. And if there is a sustainable, developer side business model to be, implemented from it, I think if Web3 gaming is going to go mainstream, we're going to need to see the heavy hitters of the traditional gaming space really start to put a lot of brain power into these economic models as well. And I think 5 years from now, it's going to be a combination of all that puts us in a very different place than we are now. Kind of what Andrew and everyone 16-bit was saying.
Let me just add one little nugget of interest there, and there is tech now though today that can allow you to, let's say, auto balance your game and game systems through machine learning and AI. So that's one advantage that we have now because these sorts of technologies are becoming available. And the same thing with things like player economies within games like this. If this new technology, if machine learning and AI, if we can use those tools to help make objective decisions, uh, the AI and the machine learning algorithms can process, they can solve the complexity issue, I suppose, that I just highlighted a moment ago. It's too complicated for any of us humans or 300 PhDs or however much resources you have in your company to figure this out because there's too many moving parts. But AI or machine learning algorithms, they can figure it out, no problem. And so if whoever can most effectively implement these new technologies into their economies and their balance, I think we'll have a massive advantage and we'll have the greatest probability of success in solving these complex issues. I know Illuvium, at the very least, is using these sorts of technologies or planning to with our arena balance, with all of our alluvials, given we have tons of alluvials with tons of very complicated factors and gameplay aspects to them. We're going to let the machines inform us on what balance decisions we should make there rather than hiring a team of the world's leading experts. Let's say in the old world, we can now use these technologies to do an even better job. And so that's something very interesting that I'm excited about, which may be a huge unlock for this entire industry.
Totally agree.
So, go ahead, Nick.
Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Sorry. My mic was having issues. No, I was just going to wrap it up. I was going to say thank you to everyone who joined today. It was really awesome having two of my favorite projects in the space, Splinterlands and Illuvium on. I think it's always, I think we need to have these conversations because I think these conversations are ultimately going to be what lets us get there as a space, as a community. For me, we really are all kind of developing this together if we want this technology to succeed. And so if it's copy paste or if it's sharing insights at an early level, I think that's what this is all about. I think the closed garden approach won't work in this space. And I think we really need to, continue to have these conversations. So thank you everyone for joining, for being open, for talking through all these things with us. We do this every week. So if you enjoyed it, please jump on next week, same time, same place. But otherwise, I'll open it to the speakers for any kind of closing comments. But thank you to everyone who joined and everyone who listened.
Yep, I gotta jump, but I really appreciate you guys having me on. I'd love to come back because it's difficult to get through too many topics in 1 hour's time. This is such a wide universe, and this process of figuring out the economy design that's really going to work for millions or tens of millions of users. That's part of what makes this space so much fun, and working in this space is being part of that amazing race to go figure it out. But thank you again for having me. Very much appreciated, and would love to come back on at some point if you'll have me.
We'd love to have you.
Awesome. The only thing I wanted to share, since everybody in here is a freak and you guys like to understand all of the deep ins and outs of Web3 economies, you guys are clearly keen. I replied to this space. It's a Cointelegraph Research did a top 20 blockchain games research report. Now, Illuvium was featured in there. Splinterlands was as well. I encourage you to read that research report. It had fascinating information in terms of active users across different chains. It just gave a great overview of a lot of the top games in the space, upcoming games, including trends. It was a really fantastic research report for those of you that like to go deeper. Don't just take people's opinions in Twitter spaces and YouTube videos on the space. Go read research reports and get your own data. It can really inform your view and can make you sound smarter if you do your own Twitter space. Thanks.
I think we might have lost, or I might have lost your mic, but thank you, Andrew. Definitely do go read that report. Thank you for sharing it. I'm really excited to see, what these next couple of years will bring, because I think there's going to be a lot coming. A lot that we're talking about now is going to be the future, and a lot of what we're going to be talking about then is going to be totally different from what we're talking about now. So really, really exciting to have this conversation with some of these early players in the space, and really looking forward to see where everything goes in the next couple of years. Thank you, everybody.